I remember the night the note appeared. It was raining. Not softly, but in a way that made the world feel like it was being washed clean or erased. I found it tucked inside my husband's old Bible, a single folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, like it had been waiting for me. It said only 5 words. Don't trust the doctor, Emma. No signature, no explanation, but the handwriting, it was his. Marcus had been gone for 6 months. Dead, they said. A heart attack, quick and silent. And yet here was his voice whispering back to me from beyond the grave. I sat in my kitchen, the note trembling in my hands. The smell of rain mixed with coffee and fear. For years, I had trusted Dr. Lang, the man who treated Marcus, the man who comforted me at the funeral. But suddenly, I couldn't stop thinking about that night, the night Marcus died. The closed door, the doctor's visit, the vial of medicine I never saw before. And one question began to burn inside me. What if Marcus never died of a heart attack? I remember the first time I met Dr. Harris. His office smelled like antiseptic and old paper, and his smile was too warm to be real. He looked at me like he already knew something I didn't. Emma, he said softly, flipping through my late husband's medical records, your husband's heart failed, but not suddenly. It was gradual. Did he ever mention dizziness or confusion? I hesitated. He was fine. We had dinner the night before he died. He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving mine. Sometimes people hide what's killing them. There was something strange about his tone, something rehearsed, almost like he'd said those words 100 times before. A week later, I found a note in my husband's old journal. It wasn't his handwriting. It said only 5 words. Don't trust the doctor, Emma. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls seemed to whisper his warning over and over. Then, at 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed, an unknown number. When I answered, no one spoke, but I could hear breathing, slow, heavy breathing. And then a voice whispered, "Too late." The next morning, I went back to my husband's study. The air was still thick with his scent, old books, ink, and cedarwood. I opened his desk drawers one by one, searching for something, anything that could explain the note. In the bottom drawer, beneath an envelope marked "Insurance," I found a small flash drive. No label, just fingerprints. His. My hands trembled as I plugged it into my laptop. It contained only one folder: Harris Research. Inside were scanned documents, medical reports, test results, and payment records. But the name on the patient files wasn't my husband's. It was mine. Page after page listed treatments I never received, surgeries I never had, and prescriptions I never filled. Someone had been pretending I was sick. And every document had Dr. Harris's signature at the bottom. My heart pounded. I grabbed my coat and rushed out. The flash drive is still warm in my pocket. At the hospital, I demanded answers. But when I reached Dr. Harris's office, it was empty. His desk cleared, his nameplate gone. The nurse looked confused when I asked where he was. "Dr. Harris?" she said, blinking. "He hasn't worked here in over a year." I stood in the hospital hallway, my pulse echoing in my ears. The nurse's words kept repeating in my head. He hasn't worked here in over a year. That couldn't be true. I had seen him just weeks before my husband died. He had shaken my hand, looked me in the eyes, and said, "He's stable now, Mrs. Wilson. You should get some rest." I remembered every detail: his white coat, his gold watch, the way he avoided eye contact when I asked too many questions. So who had that man been? I walked out of the hospital and sat in my car, clutching the flash drive. I needed to think. My husband's last note wasn't paranoia, it was a warning. And now I was standing in the middle of his unfinished message. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the files again, zooming in on every corner of each page. On one report, I noticed something faint in the lower right corner, a small watermark. It read, Harper Biogenetics, Confidential. Harper Biogenetics? The same company that had funded my husband's research 5 years ago. The same people who had offered him a private health plan right before everything went wrong. My husband had always told me, when people mix medicine and money, someone always ends up dead. I finally understood what he meant. I needed help, but I couldn't trust the police. Not yet. Instead, I called the only person who had always stood by me through every storm. Marcus, I whispered when he answered. I think someone killed him, and I think I'm next. The sky was heavy with rain that evening, as if the world itself was mourning with me. I parked 2 blocks away from the old cafe where Marcus and I had agreed to meet. It was the same place my husband and I used to go when we were young, before secrets became our daily meal. Marcus was already there, sitting in the corner, his coat damp from the storm. He looked older, wearier, but his eyes still carried the same calm strength I remembered from our college days. He stood up when he saw me. "Emma," he said softly, pulling out a chair. "You sound terrified. What's going on?" I slid the flash drive across the table. This is what my husband left behind. I think he was murdered, and whoever did it doesn't want this information out. Marcus frowned, slipping on his glasses. Harper Biogenetics, he murmured, reading one of the decrypted files. Emma, do you know what this means? These aren't just medical reports. These are human trials. I froze. Trials? Do you mean experiments? He nodded gravely. Your husband was documenting illegal tests. Someone used patients as lab subjects, and when he found out, they silenced him. The cafe felt smaller, the walls closing in with every word. Rain pounded against the glass, drowning out the sound of my trembling breath. Then Marcus leaned in closer, lowering his voice. Emma, look at me. If your husband warned you not to trust the doctor, that means the same people could still be watching you. You can't go home tonight. I swallowed hard, realizing for the first time I was being hunted. Then where do I go? I whispered. Marcus looked out the window, scanning the dark street. To the only place they won't expect you to return, he said. Your husband's old cabin in Pine Creek. If he hid anything else, that's where it'll be. I hesitated, the word cabin ringing in my mind like an echo from another life. The place we once called our sanctuary had now become my only refuge. As I stepped outside into the cold rain, I whispered to the night, All right, David, whatever truth you died for, I'm coming for it. The road to Pine Creek was a ribbon of darkness, broken only by flashes of lightning. I hadn't been there in over 20 years, not since David and I spent our last summer trying to fix a marriage that was already breaking apart. When I finally arrived, the cabin stood silent, a shadow against the tall pine trees, the roof half hidden under wet leaves. It looked abandoned, but something in the air felt alive, watching, waiting. I stepped inside. The air smelled of damp wood and old memories. Dust lay thick across the shelves, and a single photograph still hung crooked above the fireplace. Me, David, and our dog, smiling as if forever existed. I turned on my flashlight and began searching. Floorboards creaked under my weight. Every noise made me flinch. I pulled open drawers, lifted loose planks, checked behind paintings. Nothing. Then I noticed it. A small, uneven mark carved into the wall near the bookshelf. David's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. It was faint, but the message was clear. Truth is below. My pulse quickened. Below? I got down on my knees, running my hand along the floor until I found a section that sounded hollow when I tapped it. A trapdoor. It took all my strength to lift it open. A gust of stale air rushed upward. Beneath me, a narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. With trembling hands, I turned on my flashlight again and descended. Each step groaned, echoing through the cabin like whispers. At the bottom, there was a small room, concrete walls, a metal desk, and boxes stacked neatly in the corner. On the desk sat an old cassette player and a single tape labeled Emma for when it's too late. My throat tightened. David's voice. I pressed play. Emma, if you're hearing this, they've already made their move. Don't trust anyone at Harper, especially Dr. Keene. He's not who he says he is. They think I destroyed the files, but one copy remains, in the vault beneath my name. Get it before they do. And Emma, if they come for you, run. Don't be brave. Just run. The tape clicked off. Outside, thunder cracked, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. Someone was here. I froze, heart pounding in my ears. Through the small window, headlights glowed through the rain. A car door slammed. And then, a voice. Mrs. Walker, a man called softly, almost kindly. We just need to talk. Dr. Keene. I turned off the flashlight and pressed myself against the wall, clutching the tape. For the first time in my life, I understood what true fear felt like, and what it meant to fight for the truth. Rain hammered against the windows as I held my breath in that cold, underground room. Every creak of the cabin above sounded like a gun being cocked. Dr. Keene's voice was closer now, calm, steady, practiced. Emma, you shouldn't have come here alone, he said. You have no idea what you're holding. His tone made my skin crawl. He didn't sound angry, he sounded certain, like a man who already knew how the story would end. I crouched behind the boxes, gripping the cassette tape like a weapon. My heart beat so loud I thought he could hear it. The faint smell of pine and old metal filled my lungs. I wanted to scream, to run, but I forced myself still. David thought he could save you, Keene continued, his shoes creaking across the wooden floor above. But he didn't understand what was at stake. The floorboards groaned directly overhead. Then, silence. I turned off my flashlight. Total darkness. My only sound, my heartbeat, slow and sharp. Then, without warning, a knock. 3 slow taps against the trapdoor. Emma, he said, if you don't open it, I will. My mind raced. The old hatch had a metal latch. If I could find something to jam it. I scrambled, feeling around in the dark until my fingers brushed against a rusted wrench. I shoved it into the latch just as the trapdoor rattled violently. Emma, his calm voice broke into anger. You don't understand what's in that tape. I pressed my back against the wall, shaking. Then, silence. A minute passed. 2. Nothing. I dared to take a breath. Then I heard it. The sound of footsteps leaving. I waited 5 full minutes before moving. Slowly, I climbed up the stairs and peeked out through the narrow crack of the hatch. The cabin was empty. But something was wrong. The front door was open, rain blowing in, and on the floor, right by the threshold, lay a photograph. It was me, standing in my kitchen, taken from outside my house. My stomach dropped. He had been watching me for months, maybe years. And at the bottom of the photo, written in red ink, you were never supposed to find the tape. Lightning flashed through the cabin, illuminating the walls, and in that brief burst of light, I saw it. A shadow moving outside the window. Not gone, just waiting. The first time I met Dr. Keene after David's death, I remember the smell, antiseptic and lilac. His office was spotless, his smile rehearsed. He looked at me with that same calm detachment doctors use when they've already decided what your pain should look like. "Emma," he said softly, "I know this has been hard, but your husband's illness was unstoppable." Unstoppable. That word echoed like a verdict. I had spent months trying to accept that fate had taken David. But after finding his hidden notebook, the one tucked behind our family portrait, I knew fate had nothing to do with it. Inside, in his handwriting, there were names, dates, and numbers that looked like medical codes. One line stood out in red ink. "If anything happens to me, look for trial C47. Don't trust the doctor." That night, I sat by the window, the city lights trembling against the rain-streaked glass. I felt the same way, trembling, yet burning. David wasn't warning me out of fear. He was leaving me a map, and I had just taken my first step onto it. The hospital corridors had a way of swallowing sound. Every step I took echoed like a heartbeat I no longer trusted. Trial C47. That name had haunted my nights since I read it. I found it, buried deep within the hospital archives. Restricted access, confidential research. But I had something stronger than a password. Grief sharpened into determination. The files weren't about healing. They were about testing. Dozens of patients listed, dates matching David's treatments. Every one of them marked as deceased. I whisper, remembering his name under my breath. "David Carter, my love, what did they do to you?" Behind me, a voice answered. "Mrs. Carter, you shouldn't be here." Dr. Keene stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable, but his eyes cold, cornered. "I warned him to stop digging," he said, stepping closer. "He didn't listen. Neither are you." For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, not fear. Control. He thought I was weak. He thought my age, my sorrow, my silence would keep me small. But he had forgotten one thing. I had nothing left to lose. That night, I copied every file onto a small drive and walked out of the hospital without looking back. The rain was falling again. This time, I didn't hide from it. It felt like truth washing over me. I always believed justice came from the system, from the people in white coats, from the ones who swore an oath. But justice, I learned, begins when one broken woman decides she's had enough. The flash drive burned in my hand like a live ember. Every file, every signature, evidence of what David uncovered before they silenced him. Trial C47 was not a treatment. It was a death sentence disguised as hope. I went public. I sent the files to every journalist who had ever written about corruption, every law student who ever cared about truth. For the first time in years, my voice was louder than my fear. Within days, the hospital's name was on every screen. Dr. Keene was arrested, and when they dragged him out in handcuffs, I didn't feel triumph, only quiet justice. At David's grave, I finally spoke the words I'd held in my chest for too long. They tried to kill the truth, love, but you can't bury what refuses to die. The sun broke through the clouds then, soft and golden, like forgiveness. I wasn't the same woman who once sat by a hospital bed, begging for answers. I was something stronger. My husband's last note had saved my life, but the fight for truth had given it meaning. Now, when people ask who I am, I tell them this. I'm Emma Carter, a wife, a survivor, and the woman who didn't trust the doctor.